The most impressive book in the Bible is the one they have tried hardest to destroy. It's called Isaiah, and every time they attacked it, the earth gave back a piece of evidence. A scroll 24 feet long hidden in a cave. A clay prism written by the king who wanted to erase it. A seal with the prophet's name buried 10 feet from the seal of his king. They also lied to you about this book. And that lie is repeated every Sunday from the pulpits with all the good intentions in the world. You're going to find out what it is. You're going to find out why there's a chapter that millions believe is forbidden, and why that's false. And why the name of a king who had not yet been born split the scholars into two camps that are still fighting today. The real reason this book is the most impressive is not the one they told you. It's bigger. And it was buried for 2,000 years. One thing before we begin: if you're going to stay with me, leave me the like now. At the start, in good faith, not at the end, when you already know whether it was worth it. I put this together piece by piece, with the sources in hand, and the early like is what makes it reach another member of the family. If I fail you halfway through, you take it away. Let's go to the cave. It's the winter of 1946. It could be January of 47. The accounts vary, and the man who was there told the story in several ways over the course of his life, so treat it as what it is. A reconstructed scene, not a notarized record. A Bedouin shepherd of the Ta'amira tribe is out looking for a lost goat among the cliffs of the northwest shore of the Dead Sea. The air down there is dense. You're about 1,300 feet below sea level, the lowest point on the surface of the earth, and the heat rises off the rock as if the ground had a fever. The salt of the sea crystallizes on the shores and crunches under your sandals. The boy sees a hole in the cliff wall, a cave mouth, narrow, tall. He does what anyone would do. He grabs a stone and throws it inside to see if the goat comes running out. And he doesn't hear a goat. He hears pottery breaking. That sound, the dry crack of a clay jar splitting in the darkness, yards away, inside a cave no one has set foot in for 2,000 years. That sound is, without exaggeration, one of the most important sounds in the history of archaeology, and the boy who heard it had not the slightest idea. He came back later. He found clay jars lined up, some broken, others whole, almost all empty. In one, there was reddish soil. In another, wrapped in cloth and covered in a black layer like pitch, there was a scroll of leather. They sold it. It passed from hand to hand, through an antiquities dealer in Bethlehem, through a Syrian bishop, for prices that today make you laugh and make you weep. And when it finally fell into the right hands, and they spread it out on a table, it measured 24 feet. 17 sheets of leather sewn one to another. 54 columns of Hebrew writing, tight with no vowels, no punctuation, none of the signs the medieval copyists would invent later. And it contained, from beginning to end, the book of the prophet Isaiah. In Hebrew, a scroll of this type is called a Megillah, a thing that rolls. The word comes from the root galal, to roll, to turn. An ancient book is not opened, it's rolled. It's unfurled with both hands, column by column, and rolled up again on the other side as you advance. Reading was physical labor, and in the year 2021, a team from the University of Groningen did something no one had been able to do. They trained an artificial intelligence system to compare the shape of every letter of the scroll, stroke by stroke, the way you'd compare handwriting in a forensic examination. The result left them cold. The second half of the parchment was not written by the same hand as the first. There were two scribes, two men, imitating each other's style with such discipline that for 70 years nobody noticed with the naked eye. Hold on to that fact. Two hands, a single book, indistinguishable, because we're going to come back to that idea in a way you don't expect. Today that object is called the Great Isaiah Scroll. The specialists catalogue it as 1Q Isaiah A. one for cave number 1 at Qumran, and it is, to this day, the only complete biblical book that came out of the Judean desert. Now I'm going to explain to you why that matters so much that it's hard to convey. Put yourself in the skin of a scholar of the Hebrew text in the year 1945. 2 years before the discovery, you have the Hebrew Bible. You read it, you translate it, you teach it. But where did the text you're holding come from? It came from the medieval codices. The oldest complete Hebrew manuscript in existence was called the Leningrad Codex, and it was dated around the year 1008 after Christ. There was another one older still, the Aleppo Codex from around 930, and at that moment it was intact, kept in a synagogue in Syria. And there's a coincidence that still raises the hair on my arms, and that is never told together. That Aleppo Codex, the oldest, the most precise, the one Maimonides consulted, is today mutilated. It's missing around 40%, including almost all of the Torah. 200 pages gone, and the official version says they burned when the synagogue of Aleppo was set on fire in the riots of 1947. Only the journalist Matty Friedman tracked down witnesses and documents and found something uncomfortable. There are testimonies that the codex was seen intact in 1952, 5 years after the fire. And the first description of serious damage is from 1958, when the manuscript was already in Jerusalem. Nobody knows where those pages are. The matter is still open. Now look at the two dates together. In 1947, the most precious Hebrew manuscript humanity had begins to be dismembered in Syria. And that same year, less than 600 miles away, a shepherd throws a stone inside a cave and pulls out of it a scroll 1,000 years older. Complete. Think about it for a second. The book claims to have been written in the 8th century before Christ. And your oldest copy is from the Middle Ages, from the year 1000. That's a chasm of more than 1,700 years. 1,700 years of scribes copying by hand with reed pens by the light of oil lamps on animal skin, generation after generation, copy of a copy of a copy. And the question that hung over the whole Bible like a sword was this: what's left of the original after all of that? The critics said it without hedging. The text you have is corrupted. It has to be. It's mathematically impossible that it isn't. Every copyist introduces errors. Every generation accumulates the errors of the previous one and adds its own. After 1,700 years, what you hold in your hand cannot look much like what was written. And there was no way to answer, because there was nothing to compare it with, until a shepherd threw a stone. When they unrolled that parchment and set it beside the medieval text, they were doing something no student of the Bible had ever been able to do. They were leaping 1,000 years backward in the chain of copies. All at once. The scroll is dated, by the style of the writing, to around the year 125 before Christ. The carbon-14 tests gave ranges that fall in the same general zone, somewhat broader. Let's say prudently, the 2nd or 1st century before Christ. 8,000 years older than the Leningrad Codex, 1,000 years closer to the source. And now comes the part almost nobody tells you properly. And here, I have to tell you something that's going to cost me the easy applause. You'll hear it in sermons, in videos, in apologetics books written with all the sincerity in the world, that the Great Scroll is identical, word for word, to the text we have today. That after 1,000 years of copying, not one letter changed. That is false. The catalogue of variants between that parchment and the Masoretic text, the traditional Hebrew text, runs past 2,600. 2,600 differences. That's not a minor detail. It's an enormous number, and it's published and anyone can consult it. Now breathe, because the story doesn't end there. It ends in a much better place. What kind of differences are those 2,600? The overwhelming majority are orthographic. The Qumran scribe wrote with what the technicians call full spelling. He put in more auxiliary letters to mark vowel sounds than the medieval text, which writes them in a shorter form. It's the difference between writing color and color, between judgment and judgment. The word is the same, the letters change. Others are obvious copying errors, and you can see them with the naked eye. In chapter 16, there's a skip. The scribe's eye jumped from one line to another, and he swallowed half a verse. We know he did it because the text is left limping, and because the other copies of Isaiah found in that desert do have it. And there were more. 21 copies of the book turned up in the caves of Qumran, and one more farther south, at Wadi Murabba'at. 22 in total, almost all in fragments. Others are changes in word order, singulars that appear as plurals, synonyms swapped, and the differences that really change the meaning of something important, you can count them on your fingers. And now the twist that makes this whole conversation worth having. There's one verse, chapter 53, verse 11, where the parchment from the cave doesn't just differ from the medieval text, where it corrects it, where it gives back a word the medieval text had lost. And that word, in that verse, in that specific chapter, is one of the most extraordinary things you're going to hear today. Hold on to that fact. We're going to come back to it, and when we do, you're going to understand why I left it waiting. First, I have to introduce you to the man. The book introduces itself in the first line, and that line is a date. The vision of Isaiah, son of Amoz, which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. Isaiah 1 verse 1, 4 kings. That's not a literary ornament, it's a dating. We're talking in round numbers about the second half of the 8th century before Christ and the beginning of the 7th. From around the year 740 before Christ to close to 680. A ministry that stretches over decades, spanning the reigns of 4 different monarchs. To give you a sense of the moment, while the son of Amoz preaches in Jerusalem, the Assyrian Empire is the most efficient military machine the world has seen up to then. Assyria does not conquer in order to govern. It conquers in order to terrorize. It deports whole populations, mixes them, dissolves them, erases national identities the way you erase a map. And the northern kingdom, Israel, the brother kingdom, is going to fall beneath that machine during the lifetime of this prophet. The seer of Jerusalem writes with the noise of the Assyrian chariots drawing near. And his call, the moment when everything begins for him, is dated with the same precision. Chapter 6, verse 1. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord seated on a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Around 740 before Christ, a king has just died, an earthly throne is left empty, and the prophet sees another throne which is not empty. He sees burning creatures, in Hebrew seraphim from the root seraph, to burn, the ones who burn. They cover their faces, they cover their feet, they fly, and they cry out one word 3 times, holy, holy, holy. In Hebrew kadosh, which does not mean good or pure in the first instance. It means separated, was cut apart, as of another category. And the man reacts the way anyone would. He gives himself up for dead. Woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips. My eyes have seen the King. One of the burning beings takes with tongs a live coal from the altar and touches his mouth with it. Not his eyes, which were the ones that saw, not his hands, his mouth. The instrument he's going to work with for the rest of his life. I'm not going to stop here, because that vision deserves its own journey, and it's not what we came to settle today. But stay with the image of the coal, because the rest of this man's life is the life of someone whose mouth was burned, and who was then sent out to speak. And what he did with that mouth, frankly, is stranger than most people imagine. 2 sons were born to this man, and to both he gave names that were not names, they were headlines. They were prophecies walking around. The first he called Shir Jashub. It means, a remnant shall return. Imagine that. Imagine calling your son to the table for dinner, and his name being a promise that after the catastrophe, something will be left. The boy couldn't cross the square without his name preaching. The second he called Maher-Shalal Hashbaz. And that's the longest name in the whole Hebrew Bible. It means more or less, hurry to the spoil, run to the plunder. It's a cry of pillage. It's what enemy soldiers shout when they enter a city that has fallen. He gave his son the sound of an invasion. Chapter 8, verses 1 through 4. It's there with instructions to write it on a large tablet and with witnesses. And there's something even more uncomfortable. Chapter 20, verses 2 and 3. God orders him to take off his hair mantle and his sandals, and to walk that way, the text says naked and barefoot, for 3 years, as a sign against Egypt and Ethiopia. 3 years, not a symbolic gesture of one afternoon. 3 years of public humiliation in the streets of Jerusalem, so that when the Assyrians led the Egyptians away, captive, naked, and barefoot, everyone would remember the madman who had announced it walking among them. This is in the text. It's not a legend. And almost nobody preaches it because it's uncomfortable. The man who did those things, the Hebrew calls a navy. It's translated prophet. But the word doesn't mean the one who predicts. The root points to someone called, someone summoned, someone who speaks for another, a spokesman. The text also uses Hosea, the one who sees, the seer. Predicting is the result. Speaking for God is the job. And now I want to tell you about something that was discovered in Jerusalem very recently, something that could be the closest thing to this man's signature that the earth has handed us. Could. Pay attention to that word, because I'm going to be very careful with it. Year 2009. Excavations in the Ophel, just south of the Temple Mount, in Jerusalem. Directed by the archaeologist Eilat Mazar, the team sifts soil from a real context, not bought on the black market, soil excavated in place, with stratigraphy, with context, and seals turn up. Not stone seals, but bullae, lumps of soft clay that were pressed onto the cord that closed a document and on which the sender's seal was stamped. When the document burned, the papyrus disappeared and the clay was baked. The message was lost. The signature became ceramic. Among that group appeared a bulla with the name of King Hezekiah, the same Hezekiah of the book of Isaiah. Real context, real excavation. And about 10 feet away, among the other bullae of the same pile, there was a smaller one, broken on the left edge and at the top. 3 registers can be read. In the upper one, the remains of a grazing doe. In the middle one, a name, Yesha'yahu, Isaiah, in its full Hebrew form. And in the lower register, 3 clear letters, Nun, Bet, Yod, Nvy. Now listen carefully, because this is where I separate what I want to be true from what the evidence permits me to say. In Hebrew, the word prophet, Navi, is written in its full form with 1 more letter at the end, an aleph, Nvy aleph. On the bulla, the aleph is not there. Did the edge break off and take the letter with it? It's possible. There's room in the line of the frame for it to have fit. Or was there simply never an aleph, and NVI is a family name, or the father's name, and this is just some other Isaiah, a palace official who happened to have the same name? Mazar herself wrote it out in full. The meticulous examination of the damaged part found no trace of any additional letter. The reconstruction is speculative. Other epigraphers, like Shmuel Ahituv, lean toward reading it as a name and not as a title. So what do we have? We have a seal with the name Isaiah, from the right period, in the right place, 10 feet from the seal of the king Isaiah advised. We have a fascinating possibility. We do not have proof. And this channel is not going to sell you a possibility as if it were proof. Because if I do it with this one, you won't be able to trust me when I get to what really is solid. And what comes next really is solid. What comes next is written in clay by the enemy, and it's one of the most extraordinary involuntary confessions of the ancient world. Year 701 before Christ, the king of Assyria is named Sennacherib. He has come down the coast with his army like a scythe. Sidon surrenders, Ashkelon falls, Ekron falls, and now it's Judah's turn because Hezekiah, the king of Jerusalem, committed the sin Assyria does not forgive. He stopped paying the tribute. The fortified city of Lachish, the second city of the kingdom, the key that guards the road to the capital, is besieged. The Assyrians raise a ramp of packed earth against the wall, drive the battering rams up it and burst through. We know exactly how it happened because Sennacherib had the scene carved in stone to decorate the throne room of his palace at Nineveh. More than 60 feet of carved stone. You can go and see them today. They're in the British Museum. You see the ramps, you see the battering rams, you see the prisoners of Judah filing out. Lachish fell. That is sculpted on the wall of the very king who took it. And after Lachish, only Jerusalem is left. Here I want you to stop with me for a moment because the scene that comes next is in the book of Isaiah, chapter 36. And it's one of the most cinematic in the whole Old Testament. Sennacherib sends an officer. The text calls him the Rabshakeh, which people mistake for a proper name, but it isn't. It's an Assyrian office, something like chief cupbearer, a high functionary of the court. The Rabshakeh plants himself by the aqueduct of the upper pool, on the road of the fuller's field, within shouting distance of the wall, and he starts to shout. Imagine the moment. You're on the wall. The sun beats on the limestone and the stone throws the heat back into your face. Below, as far as the eye can see, there are Assyrian tents. The 46 fortified cities of your kingdom have already fallen. Your cousins, your uncles, the people of your village are going in chains on the road to Nineveh. And you're in the last city that's left. And the man below shouts. And here's the detail that makes this not fiction, but reportage. He shouts in your language. Hezekiah's officials beg him. It's in the text, chapter 36, verse 11. Speak to us in Aramaic, for we understand it. And do not speak to us in the language of Judah, in the hearing of the people who are on the wall. Translation, not in Hebrew, not in front of the people. Don't let the whole city hear you. And what does the Rabshakeh do? He raises his voice, and he shouts in Hebrew so that every hungry soldier on the wall can hear him this message. Don't let Hezekiah deceive you by saying his God will deliver you. Did the gods of Hamath deliver it? Of Arpad? Of Samaria? Not one of the gods of those lands delivered his people? Why would yours be any different? It's the oldest psychological warfare we have documented at this level of detail. And it works because it's true. Not one of those gods delivered anyone. The Rabshakeh is not lying. And Hezekiah's order, which the text also records, is one of the most eloquent responses in the Bible. Do not answer him. Silence. The whole city goes quiet. And the man below shouts until his throat goes dry against a wall that will not answer him. Now let's get to what's truly extraordinary, because you've just heard Jerusalem's version. Do you want to hear Sennacherib's version? It exists. It's a prism, a hexagonal cylinder of baked clay about 15 inches tall, covered in cuneiform writing in Akkadian from top to bottom. Several copies are known. The most famous is called the Taylor Prism, and it's in the British Museum. There's another in Chicago. It's the official archive. It's the annals of the king. It's Sennacherib telling the world and his gods what he did. And in the third campaign he says this, that Hezekiah the Judean did not submit to his yoke, that he besieged 46 of his walled cities and took them with ramps of packed earth and battering rams, that he brought out of them 200,150 people, young and old, men and women, along with horses, mules, donkeys, camels, and cattle beyond counting, and reckoned it all as plunder. And then he writes the sentence, The sentence this object is famous for, that Hezekiah himself he shut up in Jerusalem, his royal city, like a bird in a cage. Like a bird in a cage. Sounds like total victory, doesn't it? Sounds like the Assyrian king crushed the king of Judah, rid it again. And now tell me where the part is in which he takes Jerusalem. It's not there. This is the point I want to drive into you, because it's the heart of this whole block. Assyrian royal inscriptions are not private diaries. They are state propaganda, and they are propaganda with a fixed grammar. When an Assyrian king takes a capital, he says so, and he says it with verbs that repeat campaign after campaign, like a form. I besieged it, I conquered it, I destroyed it, I burned it, I carried off its gods, I dragged out its king in chains. Sennacherib uses exactly that language for the 46 cities. He uses it for Lachish, and on top of that he sculpts it in his palace. For Jerusalem, he does not use it. For Jerusalem, he has a pretty metaphor about a bird, a list of tributes, and a change of subject. A king who crushed a city does not describe it as a cage. He describes it as a ruin. The word cage describes containment, not conquest. The bird is still alive. The bird is still inside. The cage exists precisely because the bird was not devoured. And this is what seems almost unbelievable to me. We don't have to believe the Bible to know that Jerusalem did not fall in 701 before Christ. The enemy's own archive tells us, by omission, in the one place where an empire would never be modest. Now the cracks, because there are some, and covering them up would be doing the same thing Sennacherib's scribe did. The Prism says that Hezekiah sent 800 talents of silver. The Bible, in 2 Kings 18, verse 14, says 300. That difference is real, and it's there, and I'm not going to airbrush it. Now notice the detail that cuts the other way, and that's rarely mentioned. The figure for the gold does match. 30 talents in both documents, the same number in the Assyrian archive and in the Hebrew text, written by enemies, in different languages, without speaking to each other. A forger who invents a tribute doesn't get half the figures right. The most common explanation is that the Assyrian scribe inflated the number, as he inflates everything else in the same paragraph, because that text exists to glorify the king. Another possibility is that it was counted differently, or that there were payments at different times. I don't know. Nobody knows with certainty. And I'd rather tell you I don't know than invent an elegant harmonization for you. The other thing that has to be said, the Prism doesn't mention a catastrophe in his army either. Of course not. No Assyrian king ever wrote in his annals, and then I lost 185,000 men in one night. That is not evidence that it didn't happen. It's evidence of how the literary genre worked. And there's a pagan echo, a curious one, that's worth mentioning with the right label. Herodotus, the Greek historian, writing 2.5 centuries later, tells an Egyptian tradition that the Assyrian army suffered a nighttime disaster when a plague of field mice devoured the strings of their bows and the straps of their shields. It's not a confirmation, it's an ancient rumor from another culture about a nighttime disaster in the same campaign. Take it for what it's worth. No more and no less. What does remain standing, solid as the clay of the Prism, is this. The book of Isaiah is the only prophetic book in the Bible that contains a historical account we can cross-check line by line against the military file of the empire that invaded it. And the invader's file does not contradict it. That's the first real reason this book is different from all the others. The second reason is the one that split the scholars in two. There's a name in the book of Isaiah that shouldn't be there, chapter 44, verse 28, and again, with more force, in chapter 45, verse 1. The name is Cyrus, in Hebrew, Koresh, Cyrus the Great. The Persian king who in the year 539 before Christ entered Babylon, according to the Babylonian records, without a battle in the city itself, and who shortly afterward issued the decree that allowed the deported peoples, the Jews among them, to return to their lands and rebuild their temples, the man who ended the exile. And the book of Isaiah names him by his proper name. And not only does it name him, it calls him God's shepherd, and it calls him Yesha'yahu, anointed. Stop on that word a second, because it's more scandalous than it seems. Yesha'yahu, from which comes Messiah, and which in Greek is translated Christos, from which comes Christ, literally means smeared with oil. It was the gesture of consecration of the kings and priests of Israel, and in the entire Hebrew Bible, it's the title given to the anointed of the Lord. Here they give it to a Persian king, to a foreigner, to a pagan who worshipped other gods and who, according to his own inscription, attributed his victory to the god Marduk of Babylon. Cyrus is the only Gentile in all of Hebrew scripture to whom that title is applied. Now, the calculation you're doing in your head. If the son of Amos prophesied in the 8th century before Christ, let's say up to the year 680, and Cyrus enters Babylon in 539, then that name is written some 150 years in advance, more than a century before the birth of the man who would bear it. And if that's so, it's the most specific predictive prophecy in the whole Bible. Not a symbol, not an image, a proper name, a resume, and a mission. This is where the room divides in two. And I'm going to give you the best cards from both sides, the genuinely best ones, not the caricatures each camp uses to laugh at the other. Let's start with the side that says the name of Cyrus is not a prediction. In 1892, a German scholar named Bernhard Doom published a commentary on Isaiah that broke the book's back. The idea wasn't new. It had been discussed since the 18th century, and there are medieval rabbis who already sniffed something odd. But Doom systematized it and turned it into consensus. His proposal, the book, does not have one author. It has at least three. The historical prophet of the 8th century in chapters 1 through 39, an anonymous prophet of the exile in Babylon around the year 540 before Christ in chapters 40 through 55, and a third after the return in the last 11. And why? Because the arguments frankly are strong. Look at the enemy. Through the first 39 chapters, the danger the text breathes is Assyria, the empire of the 8th century, and you feel it in every line. Starting at chapter 40, Assyria practically evaporates, and the setting is Babylon, which in the days of the son of Amos was a minor power, and which only becomes the terror of the world more than a century later. And with the enemy, the tone changes. The first half is a hammer. It's judgment, denunciation, threat. And then chapter 40 opens with a word repeated twice. Like a hand laid on the back of someone who is weeping, Najamu, Najamu Ami, comfort, comfort my people. It's no longer a prophet shouting at an arrogant nation. It's someone speaking to a defeated people who have already lost everything. And there's the most uncomfortable thing of all, which is what disappears. Starting at chapter 40, Isaiah vanishes. He's not named. There's not a single narrative about him. The first half is full of, and the prophet came to the king and said to him. The second half has no prophet. It has only a voice with no body. And the matter is finished off by the way Cyrus appears, not as an enigma of the future, but as a figure the listener already knows. The text mentions him the way you mention a name that's in this week's news. That's the critical case. It's not an atheist conspiracy. It's a reading of the text, and it's been the majority reading in the academy for more than a century. Now the other camp, and its cards are real too. The strongest is a fingerprint hidden in the vocabulary. There's a title of God that runs through the whole book like a seam. Kadosh Yisrael, the Holy One of Israel. That expression appears some 25 times in Isaiah, and it's not bunched up in one half. It's spread across both, around a dozen times on each side of the supposed border. And how many times does it appear in all the rest of the Old Testament? In the other 30-odd books, in more than 1,000 years of Hebrew literature, a handful, 5 or 6, that's all. It's a way of naming God practically exclusive to this book, and it's in the two halves, supposedly written by different authors 2 centuries apart. And it doesn't come alone. There are around 24 Hebrew words and forms that appear in no other prophetic writing, and that do appear in both halves of this one. Then there's the testimony of a man named Ben Sira, a Jewish sage who wrote in Jerusalem around the year 180 before Christ. In his chapter 48, he reviews the great men of Israel, and when he comes to our prophet, he says that with a mighty spirit, he saw the last things and comforted those who mourned in Zion. He comforted those who mourned in Zion. That's material from chapter 40. That's the second half. And a Jew in Jerusalem, 180 years before Christ, already attributes it to the same man. And then there's the physical card, the one that doesn't argue, the scroll from the cave, the 66 chapters, in the same order as in your Bible, and with no mark of division between 39 and 40, none. No break, no new title, no special space. For the scribe who copied it in the 2nd century before Christ, this was one book, one. And finally, the New Testament, which leaves no doubt about how it was read in the 1st century. John chapter 12, verses 38 through 41. In the same paragraph, without stopping for breath, the evangelist quotes Isaiah 53, verse 1, second half, and immediately quotes Isaiah 6, verse 10, first half, and he attributes them both to the same man who saw one single glory. That's the conservative case. It isn't stupid either. And now the fact that serves neither camp for shouting, and that for that very reason is almost never said. In recent decades, the academic conversation shifted its axis. And it shifted in a way almost no one outside the seminaries has noticed. Through the 20th century, the question was, how many authors? And the work consisted of cutting the book into pieces and studying each piece separately. Today, a good part of critical research is devoted to the opposite, to studying the book as a literary unity, to tracing the threads that connect chapter 6 with chapter 40, chapter 11 with chapter 65, to reading it as a composed work, yes, but a coherent one, deliberately woven, where the parts answer one another. The specialists sum it up with a phrase: it moved from the theory of one author to the theory of one book. Do you understand what that means? It means the question of authorship is still open, and I'm not going to close it for you with a trick. If you believe, as the first Christians believed, that God can tell a man the name of a king who will be born a century and a half later, then there's no problem with the text at all, and the name of Cyrus is exactly what it claims to be. If you think that's not possible, Doom's hypothesis offers you a coherent explanation, and it's a serious explanation that millions of honest people hold. And you remember the 2 scribes of the scroll? 2 different hands, copying the same book, imitating each other with such discipline that it took 70 years and a machine to tell them apart. Nobody disputes that the great Isaiah scroll is a single book, and yet 2 men wrote it. Perhaps the book of Isaiah was always exactly that, and we've spent a century fighting over a badly posed question. What the physical evidence does not permit anyone to say, and this goes for both sides, is that the book is a clumsy stitching of unrelated scraps. Already in the year 125 before Christ, it was a single work. Already in 180 before Christ, it was read as a single voice. And whether that voice was one throat or a school of disciples who continued their master's work over generations, the result has a thematic unity that the harshest criticism in the world has spent a century trying to take apart and has not been able to. This is the moment in the video where I want to know what you think. Seriously. It's not a formality. Go down to the comments and leave me there in one line which camp you're in and why. I'm going to read them. This topic in particular divides people who love the Bible, and I'm extremely interested to know which card weighed more with you. Now let's go to the chapter, the one they say is forbidden. Before we go into the chapter, I need you to understand one thing about this book. One thing that explains why they fought so much over it, and it's that this parchment was not just another book in the library, it was the book. And there are two facts that, placed side by side, make an enormous noise. In the New Testament, after the Psalms, the most quoted book of the Old Testament is this one, not Genesis, not Exodus, not Deuteronomy, Isaiah. The evangelists quote it, Paul quotes it, Peter quotes it, and Revelation is woven with its vocabulary from end to end. And now, cross the desert. In the writings of the community of Qumran itself, the texts they composed, not the biblical copies, the prophet they quote most, allude to most, wrote the most commentaries on, is also this one. They found 6 ancient commentaries dedicated exclusively to him. 6. And 22 copies of the book scattered through the desert. Do you understand what I've just told you? 2 religious movements of the first century, rivals, incompatible. One shut itself in the desert to await a final war between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. The other went out into the cities to say that the kingdom had already arrived. Both of them built their entire identity on the same prophet. Nobody fights like that over a book that doesn't matter. This book was the battlefield of the first century, and the reason is that it's full of a figure that appears, disappears, comes back, changes shape, and that the text never quite finishes naming. Chapter 9, verse 6. You've probably heard it sung in December without knowing where it comes from. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder. And his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Read it again and look for the word that shouldn't be there. El Gibor. Mighty God, it's a title of God. In biblical Hebrew, El is the generic name of divinity, and Gibor is the mighty warrior, the champion. And the book of Isaiah itself, barely a chapter later, uses that exact expression, El Gibor, to refer to the God of Israel. And here they're putting it on a child. In a Jewish text, monotheistic, written by a prophet who dedicates entire chapters to mocking people who manufacture gods out of wood. That man writes that a child who is born will be called Mighty God and Everlasting Father, and also Prince of Peace, Sar Shalom, and Wonderful Counselor. Jewish specialists have offered alternative readings for centuries, and they are serious readings, that this is a theophoric name, that is, a long name that describes God and not the bearer. As happens with names like Ezekiel, God strengthens, which don't mean that Ezekiel is God. It's a grammatically possible argument, and it has to be said. But even granting that, the accumulation is extremely strange. 4 titles, one after another, on a child, on an heir to the throne of David who will reign without end. No other prophet wrote anything like that. And then there's chapter 11, verse 1. And there shall come forth a rod from the stump of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. Jesse was David's father. The stump is the dynasty, and the image is brutal. For there to be a stump, someone had to fell the tree, the royal house of David cut down to ground level, and out of that dead stump, says the prophet, something is going to sprout. The Hebrew word for that sprout is netzah, a shoot, a green shoot coming out of dead wood. And now a detail worth having, with all the caution in the world. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2, verse 23, it says, the family went to live in a town called Nazareth, so that what was spoken by the prophets might be fulfilled, that he would be called a Nazarene. And here, there's an honest problem that scholars have been chewing on for centuries. That quotation does not exist. There is no verse in the Old Testament that says, "He shall be called a Nazarene." It's the only prophetic quotation in Matthew that cannot be traced to a concrete text. One of the oldest and most discussed explanations is that Matthew is playing with this word, Netzer, that the name of the village, Nazareth, could derive from that same root, the place of the shoot, of the sprout, and that Matthew, writing for readers who knew Hebrew, would be making a wordplay on Isaiah 11. Is it true? I don't know, and nobody knows. It's a hypothesis. There are philologists who defend it and philologists who reject it, and the etymology of the village's name is genuinely in dispute. I tell it to you labeled as what it is, a debated possibility, not a fact, because I'd rather you know the discussion exists than have someone sell it to you tomorrow as if it were closed proof. What is a fact is the image, a stump, a felled tree, a dead dynasty, and a green shoot no one expected. And that figure, the child with the name of God, the shoot from the dead stump, the king who governs the poor with justice, is the same figure that's going to reappear 200 chapters of argument later with his back destroyed and with no beauty that we should desire him. That's where we're going now. Let's start with a scene that's inside the Bible itself and that almost nobody reads with the attention it deserves. Acts chapter 8. A dusty road that goes down from Jerusalem toward Gaza. It's a desert road. The text says, "Along it goes a chariot, inside goes a man. He's Ethiopian, he's a eunuch, and he's the treasurer of the queen of his country, a functionary of the very highest rank, someone who administers the money of a court. He has gone up to Jerusalem to worship, and now he's going home, and he's reading, and we know he's doing it out loud because the text says so. Philip heard him. He didn't see him read, he heard him. So this man is reciting, jolted by the wheels over the stone, with a scroll open across his knees. And what he's reading is Isaiah. A man named Philip runs up to the chariot. He hears what the Ethiopian is pronouncing, and he asks him the most honest question you can ask anyone who is reading the scriptures. Do you understand what you are reading? And the Ethiopian's answer, chapter 8, verse 31, is one of the humblest sentences in the Bible. How can I, unless someone guides me? He asks Philip to come up, and then he asks him the question that 2,000 years of argument have not managed to shake off. Acts 8, verse 34. I ask you, of whom does the prophet say this? Of himself or of some other? There it is. In the first century, a cultured reader who knows Greek, who has the money to buy himself a scroll of Isaiah, an extremely expensive object, don't forget, arrives at this passage and slams on the brakes because he doesn't know who the text is talking about. That's the problem of chapter 53. It's not a Christian invention. It's a question the passage itself generates in anyone who reads it straight through. Let's read it then. It begins before where you think. It begins at chapter 52, verse 13, because chapters didn't exist when this was written, and the break falls in the worst possible place. And what it describes is someone the text calls Abed, servant, a servant of the Lord. Of this servant it says that he had no form nor beauty, that he was despised and rejected among men, that he was Megulal, pierced, run through, for our rebellions. The Hebrew word is physical. It's a wound that goes all the way through. And it says he was meduka, crushed, ground down, for our sins. It says that like a lamb he was led to the slaughter, and that like a sheep before its shearers he was silent, and did not open his mouth. It says in verse 9 of chapter 53, something that gives you a technical chill, that his grave was assigned with the wicked, but with the rich in his death. A sentence with a strange internal tension. He was headed for the criminal's mass grave, and he ended up in a rich man's tomb. And it says in verse 12 that he was numbered with the transgressors. Now, the obligatory question, the only one that matters here. When was this written? Because if this was written after the life of Jesus of Nazareth, then there's no mystery at all. Someone composed it looking backward. And everything we built at the beginning is paid for all at once. The scroll from the cave contains chapter 53, in full, in its corresponding column. And that scroll is dated by paleography and by carbon to the 2nd or 1st century before Christ. Around 125 before Christ, according to the analysis of the writing. That's not theology, that's chemistry and it's handwriting. Chapter 53 of Isaiah existed, written, rolled up, kept in a clay jar in the Judean desert more than a century before Jesus was born. And there isn't a single serious specialist, believer or atheist who disputes that point. You can dispute who the text is talking about. That debate is legitimate and it's old. What you cannot dispute is that the text came first. It's in the cave. And now the legend, the one they probably told you. It circulates everywhere that Jews are forbidden to read Isaiah 53, that they tore it out, that they censored it, that it's the cursed chapter of the synagogue. It's false. And I say it even though I know that legend is useful and that it sounds powerful and that it gets likes. It's false all the same. What is true, and it's a real fact, is this. In the annual cycle of prophetic readings of the synagogue, the Haftarot, the portions from the prophets that are read alongside the Torah each Sabbath, the section that runs from Isaiah 52, verse 13, to the end of chapter 53, is not included. The cycle of consolation jumps from an earlier passage to chapter 54. That is true. But from there to it's forbidden, there's a chasm, and the chasm is called honesty. Because the Haftarot cover a tiny fraction of the prophetic books. The vast majority of the chapters of the prophets are not in the cycle. If absence proved censorship, then the Jews would also have forbidden hundreds more chapters, including chapters that have nothing uncomfortable about them. And what demolishes the legend completely is this. Chapter 53 is quoted and discussed openly in rabbinic literature. It's in the Talmud, in Tractate Sanhedrin, in a discussion about the names of the Messiah. It's in the Midrashim. There's no rabbi hiding it. It's on the table, and it's been on the table for centuries. With the cheap legend out of the way, now I can give you the real fact, the one that really should surprise you. There exists an ancient Jewish document called the Targum of Jonathan. A Targum is an Aramaic paraphrase of the Hebrew scriptures. They were made because the people, after the exile, spoke Aramaic and no longer understood Hebrew well. So in the synagogue, someone would translate and explain aloud while the reading was done. The Targum of the prophets is dated, in its written form, to the first centuries of our era, although it gathers up older traditions. And when it reaches Isaiah 52, verse 13, the line that opens the whole passage of the servant, it translates it like this: "Behold, my servant, the Messiah, shall prosper." The Messiah. That word is not in the Hebrew. The Hebrew says, "Behold, my servant shall prosper." The Jewish translator in Aramaic added it. He interpreted. And his interpretation was that this servant is the Messiah, and it's not an isolated case. Before the 11th century, the identification of the servant of Isaiah 53 with the Messiah was common in Jewish tradition. The reading that the servant is the people of Israel collectively, which today is the standard Jewish reading, took hold in force, starting with Rashi, the great commentator of Troy, who lived between 1040 and 1105 of our era. That is, the messianic reading is the ancient one. The collective reading is the later one. And here I have to stop you, because if I stay at this point, I'm manipulating you. The same Targum that calls the servant Messiah rewrites the verses of the suffering. It takes the lines where the servant is pierced and crushed, and it redirects them. In the Aramaic paraphrase, the one who suffers is not the Messiah, it's the nations, or it's the people. The Messiah of the Targum is a victorious king, not a mute lamb on the way to the slaughter. Do you understand what that means? The Targum gives me half of what I'd want and takes away the other half. It confirms that ancient Jewish tradition read Messiah in that servant, and it demonstrates in the same breath that that same tradition did not accept a Messiah who would die like that. If I quote you only the first half, I'm lying to you by omission. So there you have it, whole. Do with it what your conscience tells you. And the cards on the other side are real too, and they have to be put on the table. Who does the text say the servant is? The book of Isaiah itself, in chapter 41 verse 8, and again in 44 verse 1, says it in plain letters, "You, Israel, my servant." The same book, the same word, Ebed. God calls Israel his servant explicitly a few chapters away. That's an enormous card, and whoever ignores it is not arguing seriously. And the card that answers that card is in chapter 53, verse 8, where the text says he was struck for the transgression of my people. And there the question turns inside out like a glove. If the servant is the people, for whom is he being struck? For himself? And the answer to that answer exists too, and it consists of saying that within Israel there is a righteous remnant that suffers for the sin of the whole nation. And we could go on all night, because the tension is not in the dispute. The tension is in the Hebrew text itself. Isaiah uses the word servant for the people, and he uses the word servant for an individual figure who dies and by whom the people are healed. Both uses are there. In the same book, written by the same hand or by the same school. I'm not going to resolve that for you in a video and be suspicious of anyone who resolves it for you in 30 seconds. What I'm going to settle is the debt I left at the beginning. Do you remember the verse I left waiting? Chapter 53, verse 11. Open your Bible. Depending on which one you have, you're going to read something like, "He shall see the fruit of the travail of his soul and shall be satisfied." Or perhaps you'll read, "After the anguish of his soul, he shall see and be satisfied." He shall see what? The verb is there, hanging, with no object. He shall see, and it doesn't say what. In the traditional Hebrew text, the Masoretic text, the one fixed in the Middle Ages, that verb was left alone. Yireh, he shall see. And translators in every language have spent centuries trying to complete the sentence with parentheses and with footnotes, because the line as it stands limps. Now let's open the scroll from the cave. In the great Isaiah scroll, that verse has one more word, or light. He shall see light and shall be satisfied. And it's not the whim of a distracted scribe. Another copy of Isaiah found in the same cave has it. A third copy from Cave 4 has it. And the Septuagint, the Greek translation made by Jews in Alexandria centuries before Christ, has it too. 4 independent witnesses, 3 of them Hebrew and pre-Christian, say light. The medieval text doesn't have it. Textual critics have a very simple and very human explanation of what happened. In Hebrew, the word he shall see and the word light share letters and look alike when they're next to each other. A copyist at some point let his eye slip and swallowed one. It's the most common error in the trade, and it has a technical name. That is, the medieval text lost a word, and the scroll from the desert preserved it. And look at what modern Bibles did with that. Several of the main translations into English and Spanish have already adopted the reading of the scroll, and others carry it in a footnote. If you open a Bible from the last 40 years and look up that verse, there's a good chance you're reading the Qumran text and not the medieval text, and you don't know it. Now, what does he shall see light mean? And here I'm not going to sell you more than I have. In biblical Hebrew, to see the light can be an idiomatic expression that simply means to live, to exist, to enjoy life, the way we say that someone saw the light of day. It is not by itself proof of a resurrection. Anyone who tells you that verse demonstrates the resurrection is stretching the rope further than it will bear. What I can tell you, without stretching anything, is this. In a passage where the servant is pierced, crushed, led like a lamb to the slaughter, cut off from the land of the living, and placed in a tomb, there is a verse right after the death where the oldest text we possess says that he would see light and would be satisfied. And that word, which had been lost for 1,000 years, reappeared because a Bedouin shepherd threw a stone inside a cave. Think about the chain of coincidences. A boy looking for a goat, a jar, 2,000 years of perfect drought, the only climatic condition on the planet capable of preserving written sheepskin, and inside, waiting, a 3-letter word that was missing from the most disputed chapter in the Bible. I'm not going to tell you what that means. I'm telling it to you exactly as it is. And if you've made it this far, subscribe. Not for me. Because what comes now is the part that's going to change how you read this book. And it would be a shame if the channel got lost on you before then. There's a verse in this book that made a group of people move to the desert, literally. That they packed up, left their houses, left Jerusalem, and went to live on a cliff by the Dead Sea in one of the most inhospitable places on earth because of a line from a prophet. And I'm not deducing it. They left it in writing. The verse is Isaiah 40 verse 3, and you probably know it by heart without knowing it's from here. A voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Now I'm going to show you a secret hidden in the grammar, and it changes the whole verse. Ancient Hebrew was written without punctuation, no commas, no colons. The letters went one after another, and you, the reader, decided where to breathe. And in this line, where you breathe, changes everything. If you put the pause in one place, it reads, a voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way. The voice is in the wilderness. The one who shouts is in the wilderness. If you put the pause in the other place, it reads, a voice cries, in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. The voice can be anywhere. What's in the wilderness is the road. The desert is the place of the work, not of the shout. Hebrew parallelism, the way biblical poetry repeats an idea in two halves, pushes toward the second reading. Look at the second half of the verse. Make straight in the desert a highway. The place of the highway is the desert, the wasteland. By symmetry, the place of the road is the wilderness. The Septuagint, the Greek translation, put the pause in the first place, and the four Gospels quote the Septuagint. That's why in your Bible the voice cries in the wilderness. Fine. Hold that idea, because now comes the good part. The men of Qumran read Hebrew. They didn't read the Septuagint. They read the scroll, the same kind of scroll the shepherd found, and they put the pause where the Hebrew puts it. For them, the verse said that the way of the Lord is prepared in the wilderness, and they took it literally. In their own documents, in what the specialists call the community rule, column 8, they explain why they are where they are. They say they separated themselves to go into the wilderness to prepare there the way of Him. And they quote the verse, Isaiah 40 verse 3, spelled out in full. That community existed on that cliff, in that heat, with those ritual baths and that brutal discipline for generations, because it interpreted a line from this prophet as a mailing address. That's the level of power this book had over the people who read it. And now, hold on. In that same desert, in that same generation, a few miles away, along the same Jordan Valley, a man appears. He eats locusts and wild honey. He wears a garment of camel hair with a leather belt around his waist. He doesn't live in the city. He lives outside, in the wasteland, exactly where a respectable teacher should not be. And people go out to look for him. They leave Jerusalem. They come down the roads. They cross the desert to listen to a guy who shouts beside a river. And when the priests send him a delegation to ask him who he thinks he is, he doesn't answer with a title. He doesn't say, "I'm a rabbi." He doesn't say, "I'm a priest." He doesn't say, "I'm the Messiah." John chapter 1 verse 23, he answers with a quotation, "I am the voice of one crying in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord," as the prophet Isaiah said. I am a voice. He defines himself with a verse from this book. He doesn't say, "I fulfill the prophecy." He says, "I am that. I am the voice." And the four Gospels, Matthew 3, Mark 1, Luke 3, and John 1, all four, without exception, present him to the world with this same line of Isaiah. It's the letter of introduction of the man who opens the New Testament. And this is the exact point where people get drunk and start inventing. There is no evidence whatsoever that John the Baptist was an Essene, nor that he belonged to the community of Qumran, nor that he had lived with them. That's been speculated about for decades, and it's an entertaining speculation. But it's speculation. There isn't a single document that backs it up, and their messages have differences of substance. Qumran was a closed community, obsessed with ritual purity, that separated itself from the people. John did exactly the opposite. He called everyone, including tax collectors and soldiers, and put them in the water without demanding that they move to a cave. What is a fact, solid, documented, verifiable, is this. Two religious movements in the same desert, in the same generation, in the same stretch of valley, organized themselves around the same verse of this book. One applied it to its geography, the other applied it to its throat, and those are the only two things we know Isaiah 40, verse 3, did in the first century. One of those two movements ended up buried in clay jars, the other ended up beheaded in a fortress beside the Dead Sea, and the verse outlived them both. Now I want to take you to the most intimate scene the Bible gives us with this book, and it's a scene in which someone is physically holding it in his hands. Luke chapter 4, Nazareth, a Sabbath, the synagogue of a small town. It's not the temple, there's no gold, no incense, no crowds. It's a room. There are stone benches against the walls. The people have known each other since birth. The air smells of wool, of dust, and of bodies pressed together. A man from the town stands up to read. He's the carpenter's son. Everyone knows who he is. They watch this boy grow up, and they hand him the scroll of the prophet Isaiah. Stop on that object for a second. A scroll of Isaiah in a village synagogue in the first century was one of the most valuable possessions of the building. Cured leather, sewn, written by hand by a scribe who took months. It was worth a fortune. It was kept with care. It was handled with reverence, and he unrolls it. The text uses a word that suggests he searches, that he goes unfurling column after column until he finds the place, and he finds chapter 61. And he reads, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord." And there he stops. He rolls up the manuscript. He hands it back to the attendant, and he sits down. Now listen to me carefully, because this is what nobody points out to you. In the text of Isaiah, the sentence does not end there. Isaiah 61 verse 2 says in full, "To proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, and the day of vengeance of our God." The year of grace and the day of vengeance, they're in the same verse, in the same breath of the prophet, separated by a comma that in Hebrew doesn't even exist. And he read the first half, closed the scroll, and sat down. He stopped in the middle of a sentence, and all the eyes in the synagogue were fixed on him. Luke says it that way, and it's one of the most tense lines in the Gospel. The eyes of all were fixed on him, because cutting the reading off there, in that town, in front of those people who knew the passage by heart, was to make an enormous noise. It was like stopping a song everyone knows right before the chorus. And then he speaks. Luke 4, verse 21. Today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing. Today. A note, because I care that you know exactly what you're hearing. The verses didn't exist. Nobody in that room was thinking about chapter 61, verse 2. And Luke writes in Greek, and his quotation follows the Septuagint closely, not the Hebrew word for word. The cut, as we're reading it, is the cut Luke reports to us. But the cut is there, and the material he left unread, the day of vengeance, is exactly the part Isaiah puts next. It's the only time in the whole New Testament when we see Jesus of Nazareth choosing where to stop reading. And by the way, that phrase, good news, to bring good news to the poor, in the Greek version that was read in the synagogues of the diaspora, the verb is euangelizo, to announce a good message. From that root comes the word gospel. The word gospel was in Isaiah before any gospel existed. All right, I've given you the solid reasons. Now I'm going to do what almost no channel does, and it's what makes the solid ones trustworthy. I'm going to demolish the weak ones. Because on the internet, about this book, 4 or 5 spectacular claims circulate that sound incredible and that fall to pieces the moment you touch them. And every time someone repeats them from a pulpit, he does an enormous favor to the skeptics and enormous damage to honest people. I'll start with the most beloved of all. They'll have told you, Isaiah has 66 chapters, just like the 66 books of the Bible, and it divides into 39 and 27, just like the 39 books of the Old Testament and the 27 of the New. It's a Bible in miniature designed by God. It's lovely, and it's a coincidence, not a design. The chapters were not put there by Isaiah. The chapters of the Bible we owe, in their present form, to Stephen Langton, an English scholar who worked in Paris and who died in the year 1228. That is, the division into 66 chapters is about 800 years old, not 2,700. And there's more. The count of 39 books of the Old Testament is a Christian convention. The Hebrew Bible contains exactly the same material, but counts it as 24 books, because it groups the 12 minor prophets into one, joins Samuel, joins Kings, joins Chronicles, and joins Ezra with Nehemiah. So the parallel requires you to use a medieval European chapter numbering and a book count that the Jews themselves don't use. Is it a nice curiosity? Yes. Is it proof of anything? No. And using it as proof leaves you defenseless before the first person who knows Langton's date. The next one is the round earth. Isaiah 40, verse 22, says that God sits above the circle of the earth. The Bible knew the planet was a sphere. Here you have to go to the Hebrew, and the Hebrew doesn't help you. The word is jug. It means circle. A flat circle, a disc, a circumference. It's what you draw with a compass. And now the fact that sinks the argument completely. Biblical Hebrew does have a word for sphere, for ball. It's kadur. And this very book uses it. Isaiah chapter 22 verse 18 speaks of hurling someone like a ball, kadur, into a spacious land. That is, the author knew the word ball. He had it available. He used it 18 chapters earlier. And when he spoke of the earth, he chose circle. That doesn't mean Isaiah believed in a flat earth or that he stopped believing it. It means that verse is not talking about cosmology, and that forcing it to say sphere is reading with your thumb on the scale. The verse is saying something much bigger and much simpler, that God sees the world from above, and that from there the inhabitants of the earth look like grasshoppers. And there's the one about the saw. Isaiah was sawn in two. It's an ancient tradition. It's in a text called the Martyrdom of Isaiah, a writing that belongs to the Bible of no tradition. It's what's called a pseudepigraphon, and it also appears in rabbinic discussions, where it's told that King Manasseh had him executed. And there are those who connect this with Hebrews chapter 11, verse 37, where it's said that some of the faithful were sawn in two. It's a reasonable connection, and it's an ancient one, but the text of Hebrews doesn't name anyone, and the story of the saw is not in the Bible. It's tradition. It may be true tradition. But when you tell it, say it's tradition, don't say it's scripture, because it isn't. And now, the last one, which is the most delicate and the one that's argued badly in both directions. Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14. Behold, the virgin shall conceive, and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. The Hebrew word translated virgin is alma, and the objection is legitimate and has to be faced head-on. Alma does not technically mean virgin. It means a young woman, a girl of marriageable age. Hebrew has another word, betulah, which is the one used when virginity specifically is to be underlined with legal precision. If the prophet wanted to say virgin in the technical sense, the critics say he had the word at hand and he didn't use it. It's a serious argument, and whoever sweeps it under the rug isn't arguing, he's preaching. Now, let me give you the fact most people don't know, and that completely changes who has to do the explaining. Around the 3rd century before Christ, in Alexandria, a group of Jewish sages began to translate their scriptures into Greek because the Jewish community of Egypt already thought and prayed in Greek. That work is known as the Septuagint. They were Jews, translating for Jews, centuries before Jesus was born, without the slightest idea that there would exist something called Christianity. And when they reached Isaiah 7 verse 14 and came upon the word alma, they had to choose a Greek word. Greek, like Hebrew, has options. They could have used neanis, which means a young girl, no more. They chose parthenos, virgin. Those Jewish translators, 200-odd years before Christ, read alma in that verse and decided that the correct word in Greek was virgin. And when Matthew quotes that verse in the 1st chapter of his Gospel, he is not twisting the Hebrew. He's quoting the Greek Bible that the Jews of his time read in the synagogues all around the Mediterranean. Does that close the debate? No. And whoever tells you it does is selling you smoke. Because the immediate context of Isaiah 7 is an 8th century before Christ crisis. King Ahaz is terrified. 2 armies are coming to destroy him, and the prophet gives him a sign with a deadline. Before the child knows to distinguish good from evil, the 2 lands that frighten you will be desolate. There's a dimension of immediate fulfillment in the 8th century itself that the text demands and that cannot be ignored. The reading of a double fulfillment, one near and one far, is a theological interpretation, and it has to be called by its name. What does remain established, and it's the only thing I want you to take from this point, is this. The translation virgin in Isaiah 7 verse 14 was not invented by Christians. It was made by Jews in Greek before Christ. And that fact, all by itself, reorders the entire discussion. All right, we've arrived. I've already given you the facts. I've already torn down the legends. Now, I owe you the answer I promised at the beginning, and it's an answer you probably didn't expect. Why is the book of Isaiah the most impressive in the Bible? It's not because of the trick of the 66 chapters, which is a medieval coincidence. It's not because it knew the earth is round, because it doesn't say that. It's not even, in the first place, because of the beauty of the text, although the Hebrew of this book has a poetic power that specialists of every belief acknowledge without argument. The real reason is this, and I want you to hear it slowly. The book of Isaiah is the most impressive in the Bible because it is the most attacked book in the Bible, and it's the only one that has something to answer with. Think about it this way. When someone wants to tear down confidence in Scripture, he has basically 4 flanks from which to attack, and against this book they used all of them. The first attack was on the transmission. They told us, the text you have is corrupted. It cannot have survived 1700 years of hand copying. And it was a reasonable attack, and there was nothing to answer it with. And then a shepherd threw a stone inside a cave, and the oldest complete biblical manuscript in the world appeared. And it didn't only confirm in the essentials the text we already had. In one verse, precisely the most disputed of all, it gave back a word that had been lost. The second attack was on the history. They told us the siege of Jerusalem is religious propaganda, the typical legend of a small people who invent a miraculous victory for themselves. And then they dug up a clay prism in the ruins of Nineveh, written by the invader, and the invader could not write that he took the city. The third attack was on the authorship, and this one is still open, and I told it to you with all its cards, and I'm not going to close it with a trick. But even there, the book has something to say. It was already a single book in the year 125 before Christ, with no mark of a cut. It was already read as a single voice in the year 180 before Christ, and it has a divine title, the Holy One of Israel, stitched along both its halves like a signature no later editor could have forged with such patience. And the fourth attack, the heaviest of all, was on chapter 53. They told us that was written afterward, looking backward, with the history already having happened. And the answer to that attack is not in a sermon, it's in a display case, in Jerusalem, in a room shaped like a jar lid, under controlled light. It's on sheepskin, dated more than 100 years before the birth of Jesus of Nazareth. And now, the part I really want you to take away. No other book of the Bible has this file, none. Of no other book do we have 22 ancient copies found in the desert. Of no other do we have 6 ancient commentaries written by a sect that studied it obsessively. Of no other do we have the military archive of the enemy empire confirming its account. Of no other, possibly, do we have the personal seal of its author 10 feet from the seal of his king. And of no other book do we have the scene of Jesus of Nazareth physically holding it in his hands, searching for the column, reading aloud, and stopping in the middle of a sentence. All of that is from one single book, from this one. And now the irony that turns everything around. Isaiah never promised to be impressive. He never promised his book would be the longest or the most quoted or the most excavated. He promised one single thing. Chapter 40, verse 8. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God stands forever. That sentence was written by a man, or a school of men, on a piece of skin with soot ink, in a language that today only a few million people speak, in an empire that no longer exists, in a tongue that was nearly dead for centuries. And that sentence, that exact sentence, about the permanence of the word, is one of the sentences that survived 2,000 years inside a clay jar in a cave 1,300 feet below sea level, and that today you can read with your own eyes in the high-resolution photograph that a museum published for free on the internet. The grass withered, the flower faded, Assyria fell, Babylon fell, Persia fell, Rome fell, Greek stopped being the language of the world, Latin died, the empires that burned the temple are dust, and the parchment is still there. That's not a theological argument, that's a physical fact you can go and look at. I'll go back to the cave and finish where I started. The boy who threw the stone knew none of this. He didn't know what a bulla was, or an Assyrian prism, or a medieval codex. He didn't know that the thing wrapped in black cloth inside that jar was the oldest complete biblical manuscript humanity was going to find. He didn't know that that object was going to rewrite entire chapters of textual criticism, or that it would end up under armored glass in a room designed especially for it, visited by millions of people. He was looking for a goat. And when they finally got those scrolls out of the cave, they passed from hand to hand for flea market prices. One of the most valuable objects in the history of humanity, negotiated in the back room of a shoemaker's shop, wrapped in newspaper. Nobody knew what they had. And that's the part I can't get out of my head. Because the same thing that happened to that shepherd with that scroll in that cave happens to us with this book. It's right there. It fits in one hand. It costs what a meal costs. And most of the people who have it at home have never unrolled it all the way. A man wrote 66 chapters more than 2,700 years ago. A scribe copied them in a cave. A shepherd threw a stone. And here we are. The question is not whether the book is impressive. The question is what you have in your hands right now, and you still don't know what weight it carries. The parchment is in Jerusalem, under the glass, in the room shaped like a jar lid, and it's still waiting for someone to read it. Before you go, there on the screen, another video is going to appear. It's not a continuation of this one, it's another topic, another road, but it's made with the same obsession for the sources and for telling you the truth, even when it's less spectacular than the legend. If you made it this far with me, that one is going to interest you. And if you already gave the like at the beginning, thank you. Really, without that, this doesn't reach anyone.